Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the CoculesNation. My name is Secret Agent Nixno Cocules. I'm the founder and the director of the Cocules Industry Spy Network and the CoculesNation. PC building. Yes, I am a very strong, passionate advocate for building your own computers. Specifically, building Linux computers. For those that are unaware, I am a user of a Linux distribution called Linux Mint. You may have heard of it. But that said, for this tutorial, I will be using PC Building Simulator in order to do pretty much everything you need for this tutorial, with the exception of most of the outside things after installing your PC. You do what you will there. Now, I am going to be going into the NZXT workshop because I have used this in multiple videos on the channel before whenever I played PCBS. And as a start, I will be placing these things inside here. So I should be fine on that front. I'll be using this workstation, which I will be changing the peripherals. So I will go down to an FI27QP, Black Widow, and Basilisk. I'll do a Razer Invicta Black version as well, and get rid of that text. So, I'm going to be walking you through how to build a PC, well, in the most realistic way this game will allow. Now, the first things first, you need to have all the PC parts ready to go. And I think the best way to go about that is using something like PC Part Builder or PC Part Picker. I think it is called PC Part Picker. Or any other site that allows you to build PCs like on the site and then have the parts shipped over to you. I think that's a good way to go about it. But once you have all the parts, then you're ready to begin. First things first, you're going to need to set the case on the ground. Now, I will be grabbing a mid-tower case, which is what I have, a mid-tower case. So we'll do mid-tower, just mid-tower in general. Because I do want a case that is very similar to the specs on my Thermaltake case. It is a Thermaltake S300 tempered glass edition. You may have seen this in the first video ever on the channel, posted on September 3rd, 2021, when I was 18 years old. That said, I am going to be finding a similar case, and most of these are going to be like Corsair nonsense. I just want something nice and clean with a similar size. Let's go for the Fractal Design Define 7 Compact Light in black. And just to make things go a little faster for y'all, I am going to be changing some of the free build options. I'll be right back with you in just a second. Alright, so I am going to be removing quite a few of these parts. And I'll be able to do this relatively quickly. I'll just remove everything here. Remove the fans, do stuff like that. Remove the fans here too. These are just the fans that will probably come with the Fractal Design stuff. But I would recommend maybe getting some other case fans if you want a better output, if you will. That's personally what I do. Now we have the case completely gutted, right? I've gutted the case to the best that it can be for a minimalist type build. Now, if you want to get into content creation, specifically using Linux for content creation, you will want to follow these steps in order to pull this off properly. First things first, we're going to need a powerful motherboard. We're going to be starting with the motherboard. Now, the motherboard I currently have installed on my machine is pretty much 3 years old. It is a Gigabyte Aorus B550 Pro AC Revision 1.0. It is a mouthful, but that's the motherboard I have installed on my machine. This motherboard is not in PC Building Simulator, the original, but it may be in the second game, which, by the way, I won't be able to play that because of Epic Game Store, and I'm not going to get an account for Epic Game Store. Sorry, Tencent. You've lost a customer. Anyway, I'm going to be doing instead the MAG B550 Tomahawk. And there are a couple of these. There's the mortar version, the bazooka version, and the regular Tomahawk, which I will be adding onto this machine instead. Now, there are going to be some standoffs in this machine. You will want to add them onto your case, and then you'll be adding the motherboard and screwing in the 9 included screws, or 9 screws that you may have. Probably the motherboards will come with the screws, so add those instead. The next step I would recommend you do is install the CPU. The CPU that I'm going to be using is the AMD Ryzen 3600 XT. This version right here. It is a Ryzen 5 if I am not mistaken, right there. So, there is that. The next step I would recommend you do is installing whatever M.2 you have, should you decide to do an M.2, or installing an SSD of any type. But I am going to be doing an M.2. The M.2 I currently have, if I'm not mistaken, is a Samsung 960 EVO, which is the 500GB version. That drive is not in this game. So, the best chance I've got, I am going to be doing 500GB, just do 500GB, and the type is going to be an M.2. Best chance you've got for this game, at least for me, is going to be the Kingston KC2000 or the Kingston A2000. Most likely, I'm going to go for the KC2000. And that will already be installed there. So once you have that installed, your next step is going to be to install the memory. The RAM in which I currently have installed is 32GB of 3600 MHz. So that's what I'm going to be doing. Size is going to be 16GB because I'll be doing 2 of them today. The frequency will be 3500 to 4000 because 3600 is not in this game, at least as a filter. And for the manufacturer, I am going to be going for Patriot since I love the philosophy of what Patriot's going to do. So I am going to be going for their Viper Steel, 16GB. Now, in terms of installing memory onto your motherboard, since I'm doing 2 sticks, you need to insert them into slot 4 first, and then insert the other stick into slot 6. Not slot 6, slot 2. I don't know what I'm thinking. But slots 2 and 4 will be occupied with these sticks. This is for better performance. Next, I'd probably recommend adding the GPU. I have a 3060 from Zotac, which is in this game. So, for the time being, I will be adding the 3060. And it's actually down here, the Zotac Gaming Twin Edge Overclocked Edition. Despite the fact I do not overclock my card. And why would I need to overclock my card? Isn't that kind of silly? Anyway, the next step to do is actually going to be adding thermal paste. And the CPU cooler in which I have installed on the machine, I've had that for like 3 years. It is a Wraith Prism that came from the box of a Ryzen 9 3900X, which my stepfather happens to use on his machine. But for the air cooler, you probably want a beefy enough air cooler. So for me, I will be using a Dark Rock Pro 4. Though I think I will just do a TF2. Oh, the TF2. Oh, that's massive. That's big. That's kind of big. That's kind of big. I think it should fit the case though. I shouldn't really be too worried about it, I'd say. So I think I should be just fine there. I think the next step is going to be finding the case fans. And in terms of the case fans, I will be using, if I can spell it right, the Thermaltake Ring 12 Plus. So this sucker right here. I will be using 3 of these. 1 for exhaust, and 2 for intake. It'll be a push-pull configuration, we call it in the PC building community, where basically you have a massive intake of air and then it'll go out the back, or in some cases it will actually go out the top. So there is that to consider. Now all of this is done, I will be adding a couple more parts inside of this thing. Since I had pretty much gutted this entire thing, I will add the dust filter and the top panel. I think I should be okay with the front panel too. I'm not going to add the PSG shroud or side panels yet because I have no need of doing that right now. I also have this thing here, which I will be adding another one, and that's going to be the 2TB Seagate Barracuda. I have the compute version of it, and I will be adding it here. Next is going to be the power supply unit, or the PSU. I will be using an EVGA model, and the best I can go for is the 750 T2. They don't have a 750 G3 in this game. Sometimes you will have a PSU shroud on your computer. Add that too. So I will already have that added, as you see here, right as I was speaking about it too. Now, you have to do some cable management. This is going to be the hardest part of a PC build, especially since you have to do pretty much everything here. I do have the quick cable routing on, and it should already default to the black ribbon cables, since they tend to be more durable than the other ones. Now we have a couple more things to add, and that is pretty much it on that front. Now you have the ability to add both side panels, and I believe that should be your PC built. Now that you have built the PC, you're going to need to install the operating system of your choice. Now, I would personally recommend, if you are a beginner into Linux, you use Linux Mint, which is what I use for running CISN right now, or Nobara Project, both of which are really rock solid operating systems for beginners into the wonderful world of the Linux kernel, or really GNU/Linux. A common misconception about Linux is that it's an operating system, but it's not an operating system unto itself. These are just two sets of tools, the Linux kernel and the GNU utils. They're both used to make operating systems under the umbrella term that is GNU/Linux, or just Linux. So that is a massive misconception in which I wanted to dispel real quick. Anyway, now that the PC is built, you will need to install the operating system. But how in the world do you go about that, you may be asking? That should be a simple process. You'll need a USB drive with the operating system already on it and flashed and essentially burned into the drive. Now I am going to be adding the necessary components, really the necessary plugs, and I'll just do these on the top here since you really don't have anything else to deal with. Now in terms of keyboards and mice, I would recommend a good quality keyboard and mouse if you are a hardcore gamer, like obviously myself, as I have done some hardcore gaming on the channel before. You will want a mouse that has a 1000 hertz pull rate and a keyboard that also has a 1000 hertz pull rate. I would not recommend something that's 125 hertz. I use a 125 hertz keyboard, but that's what I had available to buy at the time. This was in August of 2020 when I built my own computer, so I am speaking from a little bit of experience. And for the monitor, you will want a monitor that has a good G2G, but also is good for the price, especially since you will not have to deal with many resources being taken. You will want a monitor that is at least 144 hertz, and it should also be probably 1440p at the max. I would not recommend 4K unless you have a powerful enough PC to run 4K. I'd probably go for 1440p or maybe even 1080p. That will suit you just fine, in my humble opinion. So, now we have that. Power on the machine and go into the BIOS. Here I'll just hold F2. Since we have memory that has some XMP, I will be turning on the XMP. And you do not overclock your CPU. Don't do it. For the system, make sure everything is okay. And for me personally, I have a couple settings in my BIOS turned off. Specifically Secure Boot and I think another setting. You do not want Secure Boot when you're using a Linux operating system anyway, because some drivers are going to be unsigned. You need those unsigned drivers, in my humble opinion. So I will be applying the changes and resetting it. Now we are going to be installing the OS. This is quick, but you have to go through the install process for your operating system of choice. I have, I think, 4 tutorials actually on how to install certain Linux distributions and how to optimize them for gaming purposes. They will be linked in a playlist in the description below. Now that part is done, I will be doing the same thing here. If I'm not mistaken, I think... Okay. I don't know what to do about that then. That's fine. But once everything is turned on, turn this sucker off. Right? Turn the sucker off. And that, I think, should be your PC built. Now, if you want to get gaming set up, if you want to get Linux set up, which was what I recommend you do, that should be fine. Now, a couple of things that I will go before I end today's video. The first thing is, Nixondoig, you may be asking, why do you recommend 32 gigabytes of RAM? If you want to get into video editing, which I heard is very lucrative these days, it's very competitive on who will be doing video editing, though I wouldn't be able to do it due to my bandwidth. This will also be for the speed of your editing. Now, in my defense, in terms of editing, when I did edit videos on the channel, which I've done a few, the rendering times were pretty fast with a 3600X. Actually, I just had a 3600, not the X variant. And the RAM, I always had this RAM, right? It was 32 gigabytes of G.Skill Ripjaws 5, which was 3600 megahertz. I would also recommend a pretty low cast latency. And the cast latency I have, I think, is 19, or is it 16? I think it was a 16 cast latency. I don't know. That said, this is going to be for rendering time purposes, but I would recommend a pretty powerful machine. This will probably help you out with that, so that should be okay. Also, I did an airflow-based build, as you can see here. That's another good part of it as well. And I think that should be it for here. I don't have any other tips that I can give you as far as I'm aware. I'm just going to end the video here. Thank you, and good night.